That's why it's important to understand gender and sexual orientation. We need to stop divisive, destructive attempts to change people's gender identification and sexual behavior. We need to retire the idea that people are able to psychologically alter their sexual orientation. Gender is genetically determined, as is the experience of being gay, lesbian, or transgender. Once we understand this, we disable the rationale that so often leads people to condemn, punish, and try to change those whose sexual orientation is other than straight male or straight female. Sexual orientation consists of two main elements: the sex of our body and our gender. Our sexual orientation is not a choice, nor is our sex or our gender. Our behaviors begin in the brain, and the way the brain operates is determined by our genetics. I'll explain. Gender, unlike sex, is non-physical and thus invisible, so perhaps the most challenging aspect of understanding sexual orientation is to correctly understand its gender component. Traditionally, gender has been viewed as binary, as masculine and feminine. We now know that gender also has a non-binary aspect. The continuum created by binary gender serves as a foundation for non-binary gender. If we could see gender, we would see that non-binary gender surrounds the linear foundation that is binary gender. My insights into gender came about while conducting research for my book, How Whole Brain Thinking Can Save the Future. I was seeking to understand how the brain's division into two hemispheres affects consciousness and shapes our behavior, a subject sometimes referred to as left brain, right brain studies. My focus was the systems that orchestrate the brain's various components. What I found was that gender behavior is a product of systems behavior, and these systems have a genetic origin. That origin is genetic dominance, the same genetic system that determines our sex. I also became convinced that a popular theory about the brain, that one hemisphere gives us feminine gender and the other gives us masculine gender, is well-founded. Ultimately, the key to understanding sexual orientation turned out to be my research into genetic dominance. It quickly became clear that dominance plays a much larger role in determining our sexual orientation than we have previously recognized. As we as a culture come to recognize the genetic origin of sexual orientation, fear, cruelty, and violent crime based on people's sexual orientation will eventually fade away. Generally, if we want to understand something really well, we explore its foundation, its roots. With gender, that would be a set of systems. Each hemisphere of the brain is operated by an autonomous system. Each system has unique scope, purpose, and value. Our behavior, gender behavior included, is a product of the behavior of these systems. Let's look at the two brain operating systems. In considering where to start, one particular system characteristic stands out: viewpoint. Viewpoint's importance is that it is the first step in the process of perception, and of course, what we see affects what we do. Thus, our behavior is profoundly shaped depending on which of the two viewpoints is dominant and how they work together. Keep in mind that the viewpoint we inherit has physical, mental, and spiritual consequences. Sexual orientation is a reflection of physical, mental, and spiritual behaviors. Since one viewpoint is masculine and the other is feminine, what we see not only affects what we sense, but also our mental behaviors, such as what we think and say. Our viewpoint also impacts our spiritual behavior, since it affects what we feel. Gender is perhaps most fully experienced in the spiritual realm of feeling. But how we feel reverberates in body and mind, so gender affects every part of us in some way. To better understand the systems that produce gender and determine our sexual orientation, we can draw on our knowledge of dual and non-dual systems. Binary gender is a product of dual systems. Non-binary gender is a product of non-dual systems. Dual systems give us a local viewpoint. Non-dual systems give us a global viewpoint. A local viewpoint shows us the partial aspects of our universe. A global viewpoint shows us a holistic view. From a local viewpoint, we see the details. From a global viewpoint, we see the wholeness of life, the big picture. Our dual viewpoint gives us linear perception. Our non-dual viewpoint gives us non-linear perception. The local system of our dual hemisphere causes us to be focused on our body, which is as local as we can get. This makes it, and us, selfish, which prompts us to be competitive. Dual systems are electric. Electric energies provide us with the power to chase after, to reach out for what we want. Dual system energies give us our aggression. Being selfish, competitive, and aggressive feels masculine. The brain's dual system is usually found in our left hemisphere. Our dual system is complemented by a non-dual system. Its globally oriented viewpoint produces a scattered view that allows us to see how things connect and thus perceive the unity of our world. From a viewpoint that perceives the unity of all creation, the needs of others are viewed as equal to those of our own, an especially valuable trait to have in childbearing women. Non-dual systems are altruistic, cooperative, and electromagnetic. They help us attract what we want. Non-dual energies are passive and feel feminine. Whether we inherit a dual operating system and binary gender or a non-dual operating system and non-binary gender depends on the type of brain dominance that we inherit. Brain dominance is determined by genetic dominance. In other words, genetic dominance produces brain dominance, and brain dominance gives us our gender. I've discussed genetic dominance in some of my other videos, but it's really very simple. Basically, the most common type of genetic dominance makes the operating system of one hemisphere dominant and the other recessive. This leaves us conscious of our dominant system and unconscious of our recessive system. So, even though the brain contains both genders, we are conscious of only our masculine or our feminine gender. This type of genetic dominance, known as complete dominance, produces binary gender. We acquire non-binary gender when genetic incomplete dominance or genetic codominance causes the two systems and their genders to work together in harmony. Non-binary gender is discussed in part 2 of this video. Because brain dominance typically pairs male bodies with masculine gender and female bodies with feminine gender, When we encounter a different combination, we may feel that something is wrong. Behaviors that are in disagreement with what we have been taught to expect, sexual or otherwise, will often create mental conflict until we understand what is going on. This common mental reaction has a name: cognitive dissonance. So, what happens when the dominant pattern is reversed? And instead of being informed by a masculine system, a man finds himself informed by a feminine system. Imagine the confusion this must create. Similar issues must be dealt with by women whose dominant viewpoint is that of their brain's masculine operating system. My research shows that males experience same-sex attraction when genetic dominance causes their feminine global viewpoint to be dominant and their masculine local viewpoint to be recessed. Like most females, these males perceive the world through the lens of a globally oriented non-dual system. This gives them a feminine viewpoint, and with it, a natural attraction to male bodies. Same-sex attraction occurs in women when their masculine local viewpoint dominates. Informed by their masculine system, these women are genetically led to respond like most men. They are inherently attracted to female bodies. Though not a new explanation, it is controversial. Nevertheless, I have found substantial evidence to support it. To begin to understand the experience of someone who identifies as transgender, consider the intensity that feelings can have. Some people feel their gender strongly, whereas others inherit such a weak experience that they struggle to identify their gender, and may even have an asexual experience. Imagine then what happens when someone's feeling of gender is powerful and situated in a body of the opposite sex, as for example, a female who strongly identifies with her masculine viewpoint and gender, or a male who feels profoundly feminine. In some people, the conflict between what is seen and what is felt is overpowering. Unable to change their gender to match their body, they opt to change their body to match their gender. This discussion continues in part 2, where we look at bisexual, polysexual, and compound gender.